BDELL 101.
Be Frankie.
Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out, we're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out, we're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out, we're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out, we're stuck in the matrix.
Yo, what's good? It's your boy BDELL. If you're new to this channel, hit the like button, hit the share button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. But today I'm going to give a synoptic decoding of the TV series Supacell and how it shows the intrinsic abilities of the 9Ether energy by way of magnetism. So, ladies and gentlemen, get those notes out. This is one of those videos going to put everything in perspective when you're talking about the prophetic divination process of us, the 144,000, activating the 9Ether energy and the powers and the frequencies of the universe, right? Now, one thing you got to understand about movies, if they put it in a movie, it's either they've seen it before or they know it can happen. I'm going to say it again. Anytime that you see the plastocracy put something in movies, it's either they've seen it before or they know it can happen. So there's a movie called Supacell, right? Supacell is based on the Nubian black people who suddenly gain superhuman, supernatural abilities, such as the ability to control space and time in the fabric of the reality, telekinesis, levitation, teleportation, and the ability to open up portals, the ability to move faster than the speed of light, superhuman strength, and other hidden abilities that's, are also a part of this movie. Now, one thing you got to understand is that when the Kundalini energy strikes the pineal gland, that creates the apex of consciousness that's connected to the 5 overself bodies. You got the epikinetic body, the Eka body, the electromagnetic body, gematria body, and the Zohar body. The Zohar body is the apex of consciousness, which is also known as the spirit of Melchizedek, which is the spirit of Enki, which is the spirit of the true Lord, which is the spirit of your higher self, which is also Tahuti, Thoth, whatever mythology that you follow. Now, one thing you got to understand about the foundational template of 9Ether energy. 9Ether energy is basically the blueprint of antimatter. Antimatter amalgamated is electromagnetic radiation, thermodynamics, hydrodynamics, electricity, resonant energy. That is the epitome of 9Ether energy. And those resonant frequencies collaborated together creates a recessitory, capacitor, and inductor. And that creates the coil follicles, hair follicles of 9Ether energy, which is based on electromagnetism of the conservation of energy, which is the first law of thermodynamics. So this is how you pull in your energy and the power by way of the resonant energy that's connected to the space-time continuum. Now, One thing you got to understand about the frequency of the non-ether energy, it's all connected to the plasmic waters because the universe is basically holographic. When you understand the implications that the universe is holographic, you will know that the smallest unit measurement in the universe is a Planck. A Planck is also the personification of a pixel. So they don't use that word in the those that type of framework in cosmology because that would basically denote the fact that we live in a holographic energy extraction matrix. So the smallest unit measurement in the universe is a Planck. A Planck is a pixel. Pixels is part of the trapped subatomic particles of the photonic energy when you study subatomic energy. So the plasma waters has the ability to create a power supply that creates an etheric network that's based on a electromagnetic processing that can join with the carbon body. And that phenomena in itself creates a spiraling effect in a vortex of energy that connects you to the polarity consciousness that basically dismantles the liquid crystal polarization of third density. So by way of magnetism, you have the ability to manipulate the simulation to where you're able to tap into your intuitive abilities, to where you're able to bend a spoon, to where you're able to walk through walls because you know that the simulation is holographic. When you understand that phenomenon, that's when you're able to manipulate space, time, and matter, just like these individuals in the movie Supacell, right? So you got to watch this movie. It's on Netflix, Supacell. And it's basically talking about the activation of the 144,000, right? 1 plus 4 plus 4 equals 9. 9 is equated to 9-ether energy. So the 9-ether energy in itself is based on the fact that it's the epitome of magnetism. When you look at the prefix of the word magnetism, you get mag. Mag is a part of your magic. Your magic is connected to the Fibonacci sequence of nature to where you're able to extract all the energy of elements to manipulate everything within the simulation, right? So one thing you got to understand, right, before we get into it even further in the presentation, one thing you got to understand is that the adrenaline rush molecules have the ability to extract a certain vibrational frequency to where you're able to tap into certain abilities, right? Because sometimes adrenaline rush, it can either subjugate your abilities or it can amplify those energies by way of an alchemical resource, alchemizing your demons to work for you. So in the movie, these individuals, they was able to tap into their power when they was in the state of fight or flight, which is connected to the reptilian cortex of the brain. So what happens is when they was in a state of fear, when they was in a state of anxiety, when they was in a state of anger, all these is basically factions of emotional energy. And those emotional energies was alchemized to the point where they was able to tap into the apex of their consciousness, which is the Zohar body, right? Which is your higher self. Because the gematria body is connected to the simulation, which is based in the demiurge, which is everything comprised of third density. The electromagnetic body is you understanding the spirit and matter of the body to where you tap into the Shakti energy. The Eka body is also works in conjunction with the epikinetic body because the epikinetic body is how you tap into your epigenetics by way of the Akashic records that's connected to the Bathari gland, right? In the hippocampus layer of the brain where you get all your memory from, right? So as we get into more of the presentation, right, we're going to get into the fact that a lot of people don't understand the phenomenon of what takes place when you're talking about ether. Ether is also known as the quintessential alchemical element, the fifth element that merges in with the carbon body. So when you have gamma radiation merging in with carbon, it has the ability to manipulate space, time, and matter. And when it has the ability to manipulate space, time, and matter, that's when you become the epitome of a master, meaning that you have the ability to detach from this reality and to manipulate this reality. When you're able to manipulate this reality, this is where you have supernatural abilities, right? You're supernatural because you are natural to the planet. by way of the 666, which is 6 electrons, 6 protons, 6 neutrons, which is the epitome of the non-ether energy, right? You are supernatural. Your genetics is connected to the Fibonacci sequence of nature, right? By way of the ether. Now, one thing you got to understand about ether travels faster than the speed of light, which is 186,000 miles per square feet. So what happens is it creates a refraction of index that is amalgamating from plasma discharges that creates gamma radiation. And that gamma radiation has a UVC light spectrum that has the ability to penetrate the Earth's atmosphere, which also works in conjunction with the stratosphere and the troposphere. Then when it hits the planet Earth, it hits the supersonic battery of planet Earth, which is also known as the black sun. That black sun gives an amplified energy to the coils of your feet, which is the soul of your feet that's connected to the soul of your Earth, the soul of the Earth. So those same frequencies that works in tandem with the sun, our galactic sun, the star Polaris, that also works in tandem with the black sun inside the planet. That is where you activate your tetrahedron frequency, right? As above, so below, which is also the epitome of the seal of Solomon, Solomon's temple, which is the soul of man. Soul of man. When you look at the word pyramid, pyramid means fire in the middle. That fire is your soul, right? We're going to get into it today because the UVC, ultralight electromagnetic radiation, it has the ability to absorb the Earth's atmosphere in a frequency, right? And that same radiation compiled with the carbon body creates the whole phenomenon of the people of the sun, which is full spectrum light solidified, which is melanin, which is condensed sunlight, which creates melanocytes. Melanocytes are basically a conduction of it's an intelligence molecule, which makes you a extraterrestrial being because your genetics is extra by way of this terrestrial. Now, before we get into a little more of the, because there's some notes that I had that talks about the movie. Now, in the movie, it shows you that these, the great majority of these people in the movie in Supacell, they had them in these incubation camps. They had all these black people who were basically highly spiritually gifted. They had them in these quarantine incubation camps where they was basically exiled from society because of the abilities they had. So that also works in conjunction with the great majority of people who become missing on the planet. You have 800,000 people coming up missing on time, every time, all around the planet. That's because the great majority of these people, when they trace their bloodline and they understand their genetical traits from the inception point when they was being born, a lot of them, they know about the spiritual gifts that they had, and they track these people down and they take them and they put them inside these little camps. And they show you that in the beginning of the movie, right? So that also coincides with the fact that the guy, there was a mother in the movie. She was in a sickle cell center. And one thing you got to understand about the genetics of black people, we don't get I forgot the term. We don't get it's another thing. It's like a defense mechanism that basically coats the cells to where we get sickle cell. Yeah, we don't get malaria. So the great majority of people who have the recessive genetical traits of the 6-ether energy, when they have malaria, they just have malaria. They don't have the ability to have sickle cell. Sickle cell is basically a defense mechanism of malaria to where the hemoglobin cellular structure doesn't break down intrinsically. It basically coats the cell. So that's why only so-called blacks, Nubian people, the indigenous people, we get sickle cell, right? Because like I said, it's a defense mechanism it's a survival mechanism that basically coats the cell in a form of crystallization. So also within the movie, like I said, the great majority of their powers was based on the radiant energy. Your radiant energy is connected to a form of an adrenaline rush. Your adrenaline rush comes from the fact that it's connected to your emotions. So you have to alchemize your demons. You have to alchemize your demons. You have to alchemize your demons by way of the mental state where you tap into the gamma radiation frequency, right? When you tap into the gamma radiation, it's imperative to understand that you got to understand what gamma radiation is. You got to understand what it is. The reason I have to say that you have to understand what gamma radiation is because you have to understand that we in the sun cycle now, right? So when you have the sun cycle, right, we're going back into the original construct. That is basically the re-engineering of the non-ether energy. So everything is based on a recycling point that creates dark forces of energy and light sources of energy, which is basically the epitome of balance, which is equilibrium. Equilibrium is equated to your godhood by way of the gamma radiation. So when you take in these gamma radiation frequencies, right, that's when you're able to tap into the phenomenon of nature. Nature is another word for physics, right? Because everything in physics is defined by way of force. Force is based on position and movement. So when you have everything, these particles of light, the photon light spectrum, moving in synergy, the subatomic energy moving within this atmosphere that's collapsed inside of the fermented dome, it has the ability to change, or it has the ability to create, or it has the ability to grow. But one thing I told you about everything in third density, there's no evolution for the third dimension. So by way of the plasmic discharges that creates ionization within the subatomic photon-like spectrum of the simulation, what happens is it creates a conservation of energy to where things starts to change because energy cannot be created. It cannot be destroyed. It can only be transformed. And it can only be transformed when the fermented dome opens up to where you're basically able to tap into those intrinsic abilities of the non-ether energy, just like the individuals within the movie, right? Because everything as far as your magic happens by way of magnetism, right? So all this is correlated to your Akashic records, right? Which is connected to the epikinetic body. Your epikinetic body is connected to your epigenetics. So all this is correlated to the Anansi spider. When you understand the mythologies of ancient Kemet, which is the web of energy, which is ether, and the ether is the dodecahedron that basically makes up the electromagnetic field of the planet. So when you're able to manipulate space, time, and matter, you're able to manipulate the four basic elements, which is earth, air, water, fire. So when you're able to manipulate the dodecahedron and the luminescence frequency of it, that's when you become a god. That's when you become a master by manipulating elements by way of alchemy. So notice you see the spider web right here. That's where they get the whole mythology of Spider-Man, right? Because the spider was also a representation of Enki, right? Enki is also known as the spirit of Melchizedek, who was Tahuti, who was Thoth, who was Quetzalcoatl, right? Because ether is also known as Enki, because when the ether merges in with the carbon body, right, what happens? It activates the olfactory nerve. That is your Christ consciousness. Your Christ consciousness is connected to your abilities to manipulate everything in space, time, by way of magnetism. Now, one thing you got to understand is that when you reach the apex of consciousness, when the Kundalini energy strikes the pineal gland, that's when you become a genius. You become a genius by activating your whole brain. You can't become holy until you become a whole brain thinker. That's why the word jinn comes from the word genius or genie. You become a genie, your magic, by way of the etheric abilities that's connected to the electrical phenomenon of the hydrocarbons that's connected to the re-engineering of the non-ether body that's connected to the Akashic records. Your Akashic records is how you tap into certain abilities that you had during the time when you was incarnated during the time of Atlantis, which was based on the fifth dimensional civilization, right? Because one thing you got to understand that the word genie comes from the the Arabic word jinn. Jinn is equated to engineering, engineering. So that's why I told you I'm an engineer, because they understand by way of the doctrine of signatures, your seven energy cortexes is the epitome of everything in engineering. Everything in westernized technology is an emulation of who we are, because we are the highest spiritual beings. We have supernatural abilities because the carbon body of the indigenous people is the highest form of technology on the planet. It has the highest form of technology because he has the ability to connect with the seven archangels, which is Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Azrael, Uriel, Raguel, and Remiel, which is equated to the seven energy cortexes, which is your chakra system of the color spectrum of red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. And these is all a part of the visible light spectrum in the upper atmosphere, right? Which makes you a seraphim, right? Where you get your serpentine energy, your serpentine fire. That is the etheric frequency, right? Now, one thing you got to understand when you go to the strong concordance of H5315, the word nefesh comes from the word napash, right? Which means ether, right? And that ether is basically the epitome of the electroluminescence light that sits at your chest. Because I told you, the pineal gland is not the seat of the soul. The soul enters the body by way of the pineal gland, but the heart is the seat of the soul. So when you understand that the heart is the seat of the soul, the electrical luminescence that of the carbon body emits a frequency of light. That light is your soul. And that light is basically nefesh. Nefesh is a form of ether that creates electrocarbons, that creates hydrocarbons. And those hydrocarbons creates a form of human photosynthesis, which is based on sun heat genes. And those sun heat genes is basically granulations and prominences by way of photosynthesis, which is ultra fast internal conversion. And those ultra fast internal conversion creates solar panels that gives an activation to the organic electronic device within the seat of the soul, which is your heart chakra. So that electrical luminescence denotes the fact that the great majority of superheroes, they get their power and their light from their chest. That's why the great majority of superheroes, the logos is always sitting at the chest, because they know that's where the seat of the soul is. So that's why you got to tap into the fact that you got to tap into your inner child. You tap into your inner child by doing your shadow work. You tap into your inner child by self-realization. Self-realization puts you at the apex of consciousness to where you become a master. You go from neophyte, adept to master. So when you're able to become a master, that's when you become enlightened. Light. That light is the seat of the soul that sits at the chest. That is basically the epitome of your pyramid of the seal of Solomon, right? The seal of Solomon, the soul of man. Soul. Your soul is at the chest. Pyramid, fire in the middle. That fire is ether, right? That is the quintessential alchemical element, right? So that's what this movie is basically talking about. This movie is basically talking about how to alchemize your demons by way of the activation of the sun heat genes, which is granulation and prominences, to where you're able to tap into both sources of the electromagnetic radiation of light and dark visible frequencies, to where you're able to manipulate everything in subatomic energy, which is photons. So now, what you got to understand is that when you're able to tap into those abilities, that means that you understand the phenomenon of dark matter energy, right? Dark matter energy is the epitome of 9Ether, right? Because that is all this is based on, the biblical and the biblical context and prophecies that's acclimated to westernized monotheistic religious systems. All this stuff that's going to be happening within the infrastructure of the movie is actually going to take place in the future. And the reason I say that is because the God mind is the epitome of the neuroendocrine transducer. When you transduce that energy, that creates a transgression of ether. That transgression of ether, it denotes the fact that the carbon body is a electromagnetic generator and a light code transducer. You emit those light codes by way of the lightning energy that is extracted from the aurora flames, from the ionosphere, and from the cosmic plasma. The cosmic plasma is acclimated to the matter, which is the heavy elements, right? Which is also a part of the neutrinos. Neutrinos are basically Holy Ghost particles, right? Holy Ghost particles are basically fractions of light that is emitted from the gamma radiation, right? Which creates ectoplasm, right? That is your spirit of Melchizedek, right? To where you're able to manipulate the quantum gravity equation of the dodecahedron that is connected to the carbon body. As you see right here in the middle, this is the epitome of the dodecahedron, which is the fifth element, right? Because it's basically comprised of everything in the universe, right? Then on the sides right here, you have the hexahedrons. Hexahedrons is how you trap the energy of the dodecahedron to where you're not able to manipulate the quantum gravity space-time continuum, right? So that's why the great majority of people are not able to tap into those abilities, because the great majority of everything that we eat, the great majority of everything that we think is based on the hexahedron energy. The hexahedron is extracted from the holographic photon-like spectrum of the Saturn and the Moon matrix, right? That's why everything within the simulation is a cube shape. Cubes basically locks down your energy. It cuts off your spiritual abilities, right? Because even when you look at the whole phenomenon of genetically modified foods, the great majority of the foods contain a filler of plastic, right? And what does plastic do? Plastic basically blocks out electromagnetic radiation. It blocks out electricity. So you're not getting that electricity from the gamma radiation that's hitting the planet, because the great majority of everything in the simulation is being compromised by the hexahedron sleep spell of Kingu. You under a lunar light lock frequency. The lunar light lock is the epitome of this hexahedron. But when you reach the godhood and the God state, that is the dodecahedron, meaning that you absorb all energies, you absorb all elements, you absorb everything within the Fibonacci sequence of nature to where you're able to manipulate the quantum gravity spectrum of the space-time continuum, right? So that's why you got to understand what animal magnetism is, right? When you read this book right here, right, it's called Magnetism and Magic. You got to understand what animal magnetism is. Animal magnetism basically denotes the fact that everything within the simulation keeps you at your animalistic nature. But by way of magnetism, that's how you pull yourself out of your root chakra and where you reach the apex of consciousness by going from lead to gold, by going from heaven to hell, your higher self, your Zohar body, right? Where you become a superhero, superhero to where you become supernatural. That is the alchemized spectrum of it. So you got to read this book called Magnetism and Magic, right? Because it's all based on the fact that when you're able to conjoin and amalgamate the spirit and matter, that's when you become the Shakti energy. That's gamma radiation, right? When you look at the color spectrum green, right? Which is also conducive to the heart chakra, right? Because one thing I found out that was kind of crazy about the movie, the main character in the movie Supacell, his name was Michael. Michael is the spirit of Melchizedek. When you reach the apex of consciousness, you're able to manipulate Metatron's cube. Metatron's cube is the hexahedron cube that I was just showing you here, right? That is the hexahedron. When you look at the cursor at the top, Michael is the dodecahedron. When you look at the middle of it, dodecahedron is ether. So Metatron's cube subjugates Michael. It subjugates you. It subjugates your olfactory nerve, the spirit of Melchizedek. right? So when you activate the Shakti energy by merging in the spirit body, which is your Merkaba light ship, right? Ka is the spirit, Ba is the body, which is matter. And when you merge it in with the Shakti energy, that's when you're able to ascend and evolve way past third density. That's why I showed you Metatron's cube subjugates the energy by way of the lunar light-like energy of the hexahedron. The main character in the movie Supacell, his name was Michael. Michael is Melchizedek. Melchizedek is the apex of consciousness by activating the olfactory nerve. Everything they put in these movies is spiritual, right? As I was telling you before, this movie is basically showing you the rise of the 144,000 when they activate the 9 ether energy. The reason they put it in the movies is either because they've seen it before or they know it can happen. I'm gonna say it again. Everything that you see in movies is either they know it's gonna happen or they've seen it before, right? So the main character, his name is Michael. Michael is basically Melchizedek. Melchizedek, the olfactory nerve, manipulates the space-time continuum of the subatomic energy that's based on liquid crystal polarization that makes up the holographic matrix system. The energy extraction matrix is the Metatron's cube that produces an amalgamation of subatomic particles. So that's why you have to use animal magnetism to pull yourself out of these energies to where you're able to manipulate this reality. So you got to get this book. You got to get this book called Magnetism and Magic because it gives you the metaphysical breakdown of what animal magnetism is. Now, I'm going to show you this video for a second because all this stuff that's going on within the infrastructure of the movie is really biblical. So now there's this video that I came across. Now, one thing you got to understand about gamma radiation, when you go to the inception of creation, melanin is actually so dark that it's basically the intrinsic frequency of green. Green is ether. Ether is gamma radiation. So that's why Hulk, he pulled his power from the gamma radiation, which made him green. Piccolo in Dragon Ball Z, he was green. That's because they know that the spiritual abilities, once we reach a certain apex of consciousness, that's when you tap into your power. The green is also the epitome of the heart chakra, right? Because that's the love frequency. You have to love yourself intuitively in order to tap into those abilities. But the apex of love is actually authenticity. Authenticity means that you love yourself and everything all around you to the point where you have a purpose and passion that's locked into the frequency of your heart chakra. That's when you tap into the ether.
The beginning. The beginning, the Riskians created this universe. This universe was born 24 billion years ago beneath Orion's three suns of the sun.
Now there's you notice she said something about the Orion's three sons, right? It tells you in the book of Amos that heaven is in the Orion, right? Or Uranus. Heaven is in the Orion because that is basically the epitome of seven heavens, seven, which is the epitome of everything in the life cycle, right? When you're talking about plant, animal, protoplast, man, mankind, cherubim, and seraphim, right? When you understand the Moorish science, the circle seven, right? The circle seven. Notice she said that everything is extracted as far as the trinary star system of the three suns. That is in the heavens, which is in Orion, Uranus. Now, you got a red sun, you got a blue sun, and you got a yellow sun, which is also equated to the color spectrum of Superman's garments because everybody knows that the great majority of Superman's abilities he extracted his power from the sun. That's gamma radiation. That's plasma energy. Those plasma discharges created hydrocarbons. Because when you understand the inception of creation, one thing you got to understand is that the photon hydrogen atom creates electrons, electrons create elements, elements create molecules, molecules create organs, and organs create organ systems. So when you understand that you are part of the creation of the inception of it, you have the ability to manipulate it by the gamma radiation light spectrum of the three suns, because the creation was extracted from the Orion star constellation. Those energies is what made up everything in Earth density, right? Until it was basically subjugated by the 1/3 of the galaxy that went against the order of Anu. When you're talking about the 200 fallen angels, which is basically the cherubim or your draconian reptilian, right? So what happens is the trinary star system, you got a red sun, a blue sun, and a yellow sun. Superman drew his power. That power that I was talking about is your spirit of Melchizedek, right? Which is Michael or Mikael or El Kadir, who is also known as the Green One, right? Because when you amalgamate all three color spectrums, it creates a vibrational frequency of light, which is also known as the bright day, the luminescence frequency within the factions of the carbon body that operates in fractions of light that's connected to the star Polaris. So the three sun star system is also equated to the doctrine of signatures of the celestial bodies of who we are on planet Earth. So we are basically known as the sun as well, because like I said, full spectrum light solidified is condensed sunlight. So the condensed sunlight of the 144,000 amalgamated together by way of cosmic convergence, we are basically a sun when we come together in a form of unity. So you got the sun, the star Polaris, then you got the 144,000 coming together that creates a new sun, and then you got a black sun inside the planet, which is the supersonic battery of planet Earth, which is the womb of creation. So when you have those three suns amalgamated together, that's when you're able to manipulate the whole construct of this simulation that is subjugated by the lunar light lock frequency of the moon.
So in freaking race are divine origin and are
She said we are divine origin of the sun, divine origin of everything. So that means that if the intrinsic frequencies and elements, if the intrinsic frequency of the sun has the ability to manipulate elements, what do you think is going to do to us as it gets hotter on the planet? What you think is going to do? It's going to activate certain abilities. That's why the great majority of the fruit that you see, the fruit gives off an electrical frequency to the carbon body. So that's why the great majority of the fruit right now is being compromised. Most of the fruit that you see, the food, it's all rubber. It's rubbery. The watermelon, it's all rubbery. All the fruit and everything is like a form of plastic, because I told you, plastic basically shields off and blocks radiation. It blocks off electrical energy to where you're not able to get those energies. That's why you can't tap into your powers, right? That's why because like I said, you living within, like they got so many blockages, not just within the infrastructure of the food industry. We got the firmament, then you got the blockages of the atmosphere, then you got the blockages in the food. Everything is based on the subatomic energy of the photon light spectrum that works in tandem with Saturn and the moon. Everything is based on the fact that it has to extract your energy to where you won't tap into those energies, to where you won't become supernatural, right? Because in order to be supernatural, you got to be natural to the planet, right? So you can't have recessive genetical traits and talking about you supernatural. You can't have 6 Ether.
to set up a land for a land in sight for your ancestors to return and lift those of you who have perfected their beings, things inside out and outside in. Prince, your first, they became known as the overseers, the watchers.
right? Not a coincidence. Now back to the presentation at hand. And now we're going to tap into some theological context, put everything in perspective for those who are stuck in monotheistic religion. Now, when we get into Genesis chapter 29, verse 1, it talks about black people of Adam not yet spiritually awakened, right? Spiritual awakening is happening. Everything is happening by way of the gamma radiations that's hitting the planet. Because the hotter it gets, the more it's going to amplify the neurological faculties, right? So that's why I said, in order to become supernatural, you got to be natural to the planet, right? So that's when you reach the apex of your spiritual awakening, that basically eradicates the 400-year curse that was subjugated to the 144,000. So after the land of desolation, which is happening right now, you got all these implications on the planet. The further we wake up, the more it's going to activate the 4 basic elements. Now, as we get into Joel chapter 2, verse 21, excuse me, this is also talking about the great signs and the wonders. You got one sign where it's going to be talking about, it's going to be intrinsic solar radiation for anywhere from 48 hours to 72 hours, right? Meaning that it's going to be sunlight for like 3 days straight. That's during that time period. I say that it's supposed to happen around anywhere from around 2025 to 2026. If it ever gets to that point, during those 3 days, you're supposed to be fasting. Fast. Do not eat no food to where you absorb these energies, right? When the sun hits, when it's supposed to be sunlight for 2 or 3 days, do not eat any food. Don't eat no food to where you're able to absorb those energies. And then you got the Holy Pyramid and Flora turned on. Because also another thing, when you have the great majority of these pyramids, because the pyramids is connected to the ley line energy grid system, which is also known as your dragon ley lines, all these pyramids on the planet is connected to those energy grids. So when you have pyramids turned on, that basically eradicates the electrical grid system. It eradicates the dragon ley lines. The dragon ley line is also known as the draconian reptilian net, which is the net of Indria that was created by Murdoch, which is also Enlil's son. So you got 2 different Murdochs. Inky got a Murdoch, Enlil got a Murdoch. So you got the light body, starts to turn on. All this, you got the 12 pillars of light. All this stuff is going to be happening pretty soon, right? So that's why you got to, it's imperative to understand that when you go to Deuteronomy chapter 3, verse 31:6, be strong and of a good courage, fear not, nor be afraid of them. When you're talking about them, he is talking about the cabal. He is talking about the cursed seed of Canaan, right? The Gentiles. Now, you go to Genesis chapter 46, 1, black people of Adam spiritually awakened. So this talks about the spiritual awakening process as we go through this spiritual journey on the planet, which is when you have the spirit of Melchizedek going to activate the 144,000. Now, when you go to Haggai chapter 2, verse 18, it is basically talking about the reactivation of the pyramids in America during the 9th Hebrew lunar cycle of the month of 2024, right? So so when it talks right here, the 20th day of the 9th, which is also equated to November or December of this year, that's when you're going to have the beginning points of the spirit of Melchizedek, where you have these spiritual awakenings. Because we had an awakening during the time right before the incidents that happened when you're talking about the draconian juice. We had that happen in 2020. A lot of people had a spiritual awakening during that process, but we're going to reach another apex of a spiritual awakening during the times of November and December, right? That is going to cause a reactivation. So from the 9th lunar Hebrew month of 2024 Thoth will bless the priest, King Louis, Levites, which is also known as your 144,000. So the 144,000 during this time period, like I said, you're going to be awakened during this time period. That is when you're going to reach the apex of consciousness during the time of December 25th of 2024. So this is based on the biblical construct of monotheistic religious systems, according to what they put inside these books, because I told you the great majority of everything in the Bible is basically it's amalgamated by two books, because the word Bible, Bi means two. The prefix of the word Bible, Bi means two. The Egyptian Book of the Dead, which is the coming forth by day, and the Egyptian Book of Life, right? Or the Kemetic Book of Life. That's what it's comprised of. So during this time of 1 Corinthians 15:52, the sound of the last trumpet. So this is where you get into the fact that Donald Trump is going to be the last president. Because during the time of 2025, 2 + 2 + 5 = 9. 9 is the activation of the 9Ether energy on December 25th of 2024, when you reach the apex of consciousness, the activation of the 144,000, because during that time period, you're going to have the sound of the last trumpet, which is Trump, as they're going to try to bring in the Project 2025 manifesto. So they're going to try to subjugate the light. So the time of Trump is the time to prepare for the first arise of Exodus. So Corinthians 15:2, in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump, Donald Trump, for the trumpet shall sound, and the incorruptible, and shall we be. And then when you go to Thessalonians 4:6, for the Lord himself descend from the heaven, so that when you talk about the Lord, the true Lord is Melchizedek, Thoth, Tahuti, the olfactory nerve. The true Lord is a consciousness, right? That is you. That is the 144,000, where you tap into those abilities just like the people in the movie, to where you reconnect with the awakening process of the planet. Now, you have the terrestrial atom changed to celestial atom Cadman, or El Qadir, right? El Qadir is the green one. The green one is the gamma radiation, which basically makes you anointed. You are the Christ consciousness, which is basically your overself. Your overself is your Zohar body, which is the Son of Man, that is based on equilibrium, which is God, because God is the highest extension of the mind, which uses elements and matter to express itself. When you're able to reach the apex of consciousness, when the Kundalini energy strikes the pineal gland, that's when you're able to manipulate the timeline that's based in third density, to where you're able to manipulate darkness and the physical light spectrum of the fallen man, right? So that's what this is all about. When you read everything intuitively, this is the esoteric science of the biblical context in the Bible, right? This is talking about the activation of the true Adamic people, right? So when you go to Corinthians 15:47, the first man is of the earth, earthly, and the second man, Lord, from heaven. Lord is also equated to Elohim, or Elohim, whatever you want to call it, because Elohim is plural, which is basically a part of the factions of the Anunnaki. So this is where you get the merging of dimensions, when you have the upper fourth dimension merging in with the ninth dimension. So this is where we get into Psalms 135, verse 4, chapter 135, verse 4. Thoth, Melchizedek, is also equated to Lord, have chosen. The chosen are the 144,000, the ones that's going to tap into those abilities. Because as I was telling you before, eventually there's going to come a time where you're going to have intrinsic solar radiation hitting the planet, and it's going to crack open the dome during the time of 2030, right? So essentially, we basically only got about 6 more years left, and before that dome cracks open, because that's when you're going to have the apex of these individuals being able to tap into the energy, just like the people in the movie was doing in the movie Supacell. So the black race spiritually awakened. Jacob unto him himself, Israel for his peculiar treasure. So that's what this is all about, right? And another thing you have to understand is that the socio-political aspect of civics basically breaks down and connects you right back to the system. You have to detach from everything. How you expect to tap into your powers and you still have a mental connection to the political structure when you have a mental connection to everything in third density? Because the apex of consciousness is when you detach. Because when you connect yourself to these factions, you are spiritually dead in the eyes of law. You are the fallen man. You are dead. So the soul is taken. So you are basically soulless by way of being a citizen in a political system, because the word city, sin, city means municipal. Zen means a subordinate slave. So when you call yourself a citizen, right, you're basically calling yourself a municipal slave to the political infrastructure that's connected to the factions of the totalitarian government. So in order to tap into your everything, like I said, the political system is an energy extraction. Stop giving your energy, your electrical energy, to elect certain individuals into office. Take your power back, right? Take your power back. That's what it's all about. Taking your power back by detaching yourself to where you become the divine awakening 144,000, to where you're living with a soul. But you can only do that is when you detach, right? Now, that must happen because your purpose on the planet is to change and transmute energy, to transmute darkness into light. These units of the soul began the work assigned to them to transmute, harmonize, and change disorder into order, right? And that disorder into order is by going from the patriarchal standpoint to the matriarch. Matriarch is the epitome of balance, to where the man and the woman of the centripetal and the centrifugal forces working in tandem. We feed off each other in a positive manner. Now, as I was telling you before, the apex of consciousness is Tahuti or Tahuti, Thoth, Hermes, Melchizedek, Quetzalcoatl, the olfactory nerve, Christ consciousness. All that is basically connected to who you are on the mythological level. So, damn, Thoth is basically us, right? We are the spirit of Melchizedek. So right here it says, right, he framed the laws by which heaven, earth, and all the heavenly bodies are maintained. Ordered the courses of the sun, the moon, the stars. He invented drawing and designing the arts and the letters and the alphabet, the art of writing, the art of mathematics, right? Because everything in the simulation, you got to understand that the universe is mathematical. So when you understand that phenomenon, that's when you're able to manipulate the binary code system of subatomic energy that is being controlled on the dark side of the moon with a supercomputer. Now, this is where I get into the fact that and prove to you that the great majority of Black people have supernatural abilities, just like in a movie. Because as I was telling you before, if they put it in a movie, it's either they know it can happen or they've seen it before. So when you read this publication, African Origin of Biological Psychiatry by Richard King. Let me get a drink real quick. By Richard King. Now, according to Richard King, African Origin Biological Psychiatry, he states that the Africans have 5 to 15% calcified pineal glands. Asians have 15 to 25%. Europeans have 60 to 80%. So now the DMT birth lasts until puberty, when the pineal gland calcifies, no longer produces chemicals. The pineal gland will produce melatonin to regulate our sleep patterns, but no longer secretes the 5-meo DMT or pinealine. Therefore, those with uncalcified pineal glands may release DMT through tantric yoga, heavy meditations, breathing exercises. During natural death experience, pineal gland will release the last of the 5-meo DMT and DMT along with the pinealine once flooding the brain with these two chemicals. So that's how you reach the apex of consciousness. So like I said, you got to work on yourself. You don't just, you know what I'm saying? One thing you got to understand, this is just an analogy that I'm going to give you. Books itself, like just reading books is not how you're going to tap into your powers. Books are basically a catalyst for knowledge, right? Because information applied is knowledge, and the application of knowledge is wisdom, and wisdom is a precursor to enlightenment, and enlightenment is how you reach the apex of becoming supernatural. So you got to do your motherfucking shadow work in order to tap into these abilities. You got to come to a point of self-realization. You don't just get to the next level by just reading books. It's just a catalyst to get you to the next level. So that's why you got to do tantric yoga. You got to do heavy meditations. You got to do breathing exercises. You got to go get body massage. You got to get in the gym and work out. You got to exercise those demons. When you exercise those demons, you make your demons work for you. Your demons is connected to the demiurge because the demiurge is your emotions. Now, when you can have control of your emotions, that's when you become balanced. When you become balanced, you become a god. God is equilibrium. So when you become balanced, right, that's when you're able to manipulate everything around you because you have no attachment to the system. So it shows you right here in this publication that Black people have superpowers, and it comes from a magazine that was published in November 18, 2014. Now, it shows you that 5 studies have found that white people tend to believe that Black people have superhuman abilities. A research paper published in the journal Personality Science claims that that is the first empirical investigation of superhumanization or the attribution of supernatural, extrasensory, and magical mental and physical qualities to humans. The first 2 studies tested implicit beliefs, showing that whites tend to associate Black people with supernatural. They then test this is on the explicit level and found that the more whites think that Black people have supernatural abilities, the more pain they think that Black people can compare to white people. Together, these studies demonstrate a novel and potentially detrimental process through which whites perceive Blacks. The researchers wrote, so that if you think a Black person is so if you're a Black person reading this and you have faced a situation where it feels like your white boss expects you to do the humanly impossible, well, science says that he or she does. So that's because like the great majority of everything that we do right now, like people are gonna, they expect you to do certain things. Like, well, you play basketball, well, you was able to do it. You can jump down, you can do this. You're supposed to be able to do that because they understand who we are genetically, right? They understand who we are genetically. They understand who we are genetically because this is in conjunction to Henrietta Lacks, because Henrietta Lacks, she had immortalized cell lines to where the cells was able to replicate herself. So they use her, they use all of her, when you screenshot this, because I'm not going to say any of these terms, so screenshot this, but they was using her genetics for many different things all throughout history since the inception point during the time that she died. So, they was using her cells for many different things because they know that we have certain capabilities. Now, now this is when we get into the fact that you got certain individuals on the planet all throughout history had certain abilities. Now, this is a guy named Sheikh Bamba. Now, Sheikh Bamba, who was also known as a healer, he lived from 1853 to 1927 while living in Senegal under French colonial rule. They said that he was able to basically disappear in thin air. So this is one of the only pictures that you can really find of him, or other pictures on the internet. Some of them are fake or whatever, but they said that he didn't have, he was missing a hand and he was missing a foot and he was able to float. He was able to float. So he basically devoted his life to the awakening of the human consciousness and to basically free his people of the oppression of colonial rulership. He was also known as a prophet. This is another guy. His name is Simon Kambengu, right? So when you read this publication, The True Third Secret of the Fatima Revealed in the Return of Christ by Pastor Emilio. So Simon Kambengu was a prophet left to rot in tortures in prison. He died there in October 1951 after 30 years. There are Africans alive at this writing who were brought back from the dead by Simon Kambengu. And there are people still living who watched him do it. They claim that Simon Kambengu healed the sick, made the lame walk, returned sight to the blind and hearing to the deaf, and even brought an infant dead 3 days back to life. Kambengu performed these miraculous deeds over a period of 5 months from May 1921 through September 12, 1921. Scholars do not dispute that is, they basically don't dispute anything that this man performed. Then you got another guy. We all know about Simeon Toko. So this talks about Simeon Toko. And there's a lot of stuff that a lot of people don't know that Simeon Toko did. There's a lot of stuff that he did that's hidden, and I'm going to reveal them within the infrastructure of this presentation. So it says right here in the publication that the emergence of the African avatars in the Secret Fatima by Tom Dark in the Nexus magazine. Simeon Toko, born on February 24th, 1918 to 1984, Simeon Toko appeared before people in a apparitional body and dream states while being physically alive, and continues to do the same among certain selected people 17 years after his death. At least one witness says he personally killed Simeon Toko quite professionally, as he hired a killer and saw him alive again a few days later with his body put back together. Others still living at this time writing said that Simeon Toko was physically slaughtered and watched him bring himself back together before their astonished eyes, meaning that he had the ability to regenerate. Regenerating means that, like I said, you chop my arm off, it'll grow right back. So that means that, that is connected to the epitome of the photon hydrogen atom that is amalgamated with hydrocarbons. Hydrocarbons, when you study the physiology of starfish has the ability to do the same thing. You cut a starfish, is going to make another starfish, right? That is the regeneration process. We have those same capabilities. So Simeon Toko unleashed his army. The event was witnessed by thousands of people on January 4th, 1959. On that day, Cherubin and Seraphim appeared and stood against the Belgian colonial army. The citizens of Leopoldville saw an army of about 1,000 of very small men. So they said those size of the men were like dwarfs. So this is basically is connected to the Twa people. The Twa people, the Black Twas, were some of the very first people that was on this planet, and they had superhuman strength. And they said that one of them was able to flip a 5-ton truck, truck over with one arm. So that's, like I said, these superhuman abilities is not just being propagated in the movie. All this stuff happened in real life. All this stuff can happen in real life, right? Because they know who we are genetically when the sun is at the apex of producing an influx of gamma radiation. They also said that Simeon Toko, they said that he made an aircraft stop in midair. It stood still, not advancing an inch, and nor rose and fell back. The crew was stricken with panic, and the priest could hardly breathe. And later, Simeon Toko lifted his eyes and his hands toward the heavens and said a prayer, and the plane started to move again. So, like I said, we have abilities. We just got to tap into those abilities, right? So that's why it's imperative to understand the whole construct, the molecular construct of what melanin is. Melanin is basically combinations that eat light, intrinsic solar radiation, light in order to maintain, expand, and evolve matter. The more highly evolved a species, the more complex its biological capacity to use light, right? Because I told you, light has the ability to manipulate the subatomic energy of the photon light spectrum, right? So the pineal gland is rich in neuromelanin. The neuromelanin has the ability to activate the thalamus gland, which is comprised of the pituitary glands and the hypothalamus gland, which is also known as the master gland. The master gland is how you reach the apex of consciousness, which is also known as the sacred pyramid of the brain. The pineal gland helps you to overcome death by taking external forces and combining them with sexual energy and the original force to form a immortal body called the golden dragon body, right? The golden dragon body is the apex of consciousness. So that's why it's imperative to understand you know, there's a lot of implications that's going to be taking place on the planet, right? So you have to alchemize those demons to where you're not subjugated by what's taking place on the external level. Stop worrying about what the president's doing, right? Stop worrying about, this country's doing this country's doing that. Detach to where you can detach from detach to where you can tap into those abilities, right? So that's what it's all about. So like I said, you got to watch this movie called Supercell. You got to watch this movie because it's basically talking about the activation of the 9 Ether energy and the rise of the 144,000. So as I was telling you before, the guy in the movie, his main character was named Michael, but he had a higher self. Your higher self is your Zohar body. Your Zohar body is connected to the epikinetic body, Eka body, gematria body, and the electromagnetic body. So when you tap into your Akashic records to activate those abilities, that's connected to the epigenetics, right? You activate those abilities from the resistor and the capacitor and the inductor of 9 Ether energy to where you're able to manipulate the etheric network by way of the plasma waters that's connected to the source of energy of the electromagnetic processing of the black sun, which is also known as the supersonic battery that has the ability to manipulate the polarity consciousness of the liquid crystal polarization, which is based on liquid crystal technology that is extracted from the Saturn moon matrix. So that is the holographic projection when you understand subatomic energy. The subatomic energy is manipulated by the quintessential alchemical element, the fifth element, and the fifth element is the 9 Ether energy. The 9 Ether energy is when you're able to manipulate the space-time continuum. When you're able to do that, that's when you're able to tap into your powers because light travels at 186,000 miles per square feet to where you can tap into the gamma radiation during the apex of consciousness because we at the sun cycle. When you understand that we in the sun cycle, you understand the conservation of energy. The conservation of energy is the first law of thermodynamics. When you understand the law of thermodynamics, that's when you're able to transmute heat into electrical energy. The electrical energy amplifies the gamma radiation that works in tandem with the carbon body. The carbon body is activated by the dodecahedron that manipulates everything in the hexahedron. The hexahedron is everything that's connected to third density that is basically the infrastructure of the demiurge. When you understand that phenomenon, that's when you reach the apex of consciousness by activating the heart chakra. The heart chakra in itself is a luminescence energy that connects you right back to source. The source is you. The source is the spirit of Melchizedek. The source is the epitome of the Christ consciousness. Because as I was telling you before, God is the highest essential of the mind, which is the elements and matter to express itself. So when you emit that light, you activate the heart chakra. The heart chakra is the seat of the soul when you understand comedic spirituality. So that's why superheroes, they always put the emblem on their chest because that's how they draw their light. They draw their light by way of the activation of the heart chakra. So that's what this movie is all about. It's activating the 9 Ether genetical properties in order to become supernatural. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to give a little talk real quick. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, that's why it's imperative to understand who you are genetically, who you are neurologically, right? Because we living in a time right now to where things is going to start getting weird. A lot of stuff is going to start happening to us on a genetical level. So it's imperative to understand who you are neurologically and genetically, right? So you got to watch that movie Supacell. It's basically talking about the galvanization of the 144,000 as they activate the 9-ether energy. 9-ether, as I was telling you before, is basically the foundational blueprint of antimatter. Antimatter is basically 9-ether, right? 9-ether collaborated with antimatter is electromagnetic radiation, thermodynamics, hydrodynamics, electrical energy, and resonant energy, right? That is what 9-ether is. So when you reach the apex of consciousness, that's when you're able to activate those certain abilities. A lot of stuff on the planet is going to start to change to where the carbon body is going to turn into a crystalline state. That is a transmutation of the conservation of energy. The conservation of energy is how you transmute that energy, right? This is all connected to who you are on a genetical level, right? So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, you got to watch this movie, watch this TV show, because as I was telling you before, the reason they put it in the movies is because either they've seen it before or they know it can happen. Not a coincidence. Not a coincidence that the main character's name was Michael. Michael is Mikael. Mikael is El Qadir. El Qadir is the green one. The green one is the ether. The ether is the gamma radiation, right? The gamma radiation is how Hulk tapped into his power. He was the color green, right? When you look at the sigil that Tahuti or Thoth holds, he holds a tetrahedron. That tetrahedron gives off gamma radiation, that green etheric energy. That green Etherian frequency is your spirit of Melchizedek. That is the Sufi order of the sons of green light, right? So when you tapped into the evolutionary construct of the color green, that's when you're able to tap into those abilities because it's connected to the heart chakra. That's connected to the thymus gland. That thymus gland is activated. But anybody who has the 6-ether genetical properties, their thymus gland is depleted after the age of 13. So that's why it's imperative to understand that everybody's not the same on a genetical level. That's a lie. 9-ether, 6-ether. It's either you got it or you don't. You know what I'm saying? So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for watching this video. And I got the full song of, Stuck in the Matrix. It's on my YouTube channel, so check that video out. A lot of people may ask me about it, and I'm going to release the outro, the full song, and I'm going to put it in a separate video. So, for people to have that song, because those songs are very high vibrational and it's basically conducive to everything that's going on right now. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, watch this video. Share this video. And I appreciate you guys for watching. End of transmission.
10:14. We will put an end to this madness.
It's me again, God. I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land. Karma's gonna get to you and then you'll have a chariot with only one less friend. Now I had distant folks that are looking to my eyes to understand the wisdom he's given and his wealth from the skies. So thanks for this meal that I'm about to receive, and thank you for my health and all the good memories. Thanks for the courage taking on another day when I used to not believe, but now I know about grace. Stay away from the fire cause the flames does burn. Go with your gut feeling, when it's wrong you learn. For every one step I take, the Lord takes two. And do unto others if you want it done unto you. It's me again, God. I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land. It's me again, God. I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land. this a completion. The selfish proto-Grecian, Amerindian, Phoenician. I'm the last of the Mohicans, the bastard of the land, the pen, melanin, accretion. And we just trying to get back to the fact that we was kings and queens of a land before the avalanche seized it. I live on Turtle Island with the rest of the diseased. Better than the medicine for 7 different treatments. Niggas try to ride away but end up getting seasick. The sleep can feel my words like Braille and they're awakened with the penmanship of Hindu script written in them vacant monastery. Honorary payments to the prototype. Tomorrow's only a day away but nothing happens overnight. The fuck's wrong with going left when you know it's right? Biting off more than I can chew, that's an overbite. Black on black crime is like watching 2 soldiers fight when all along they was on the same page. History. It's me again, God, I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land. It's me again, God, I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land.